Good afternoon and welcome to Region 6 MTSS Summer Conference. Thank you for joining us for this session, Rules of Engagement, Utilizing Workstations for Small Groups and Differentiation, presented by Beth McDaniel. Beth is the secondary RLA specialist for Region 6. My name is Amy Cunningham. I'm the elementary RLA specialist for Region 6, and I'm going to serve as your moderator for the presentation. I'd like to remind you of a few interactive features that are provided within the program. So you can post questions during the presentation and vote those questions to the top of the list by clicking on the arrow, which can be found next to the question. I also want to remind you that we have social media sharing provided within the platform. You can use the hashtag ESC6 MTSS21 to post and to follow the conference conversation. If you need help or technical assistance, you can visit the help desk by clicking on the question mark in the side navigation. Okay, so without any further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Beth McDaniel.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk to you guys today. So if you will, we're going to actually run through this in Pear Deck so that you guys can have some interaction and we can talk back and forth, and there'll be some kind of think alouds happening. So if you will, just go to joinpd.com and type in this class code. We're going to work through this together. Like I said, I want it to be really interactive. Do keep in mind that we are on a bit of a time delay. So what I say, you're hearing about 16 seconds after I say it. So I will be using some wait time today to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to interact. So if you will, like I say, go ahead and go to joinpd.com and type in that class code, MWAGAM. I also did put it in the chat on the conference platform. So if you want to join from there, that's going to actually take you to a website, and I'll give you that information here in just a second. All right, I told Amy earlier, I said, Amy, feel free to turn your camera off because I'll turn mine off as well. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I always think it's super distracting when you're presenting virtually to only be able to see yourself. So I will turn my camera off too, so that you're not just looking at me and I'm not just looking at me also. So I will see you guys at the end though. And if there's any questions, like Amy said, feel free to use that interactive feature within the event platform. And you are also going to have opportunities to respond to different questions and interact through the Pear Deck as well. All right. So let me get everything ready and we will get started. So today I'm going to talk to you just about utilizing workstations in your secondary classroom for small group and differentiation. So when I was first asked to present, I wasn't really sure what direction I wanted to go because there are so many different ways that we are trying to serve and differentiate for our students. But when I started thinking back to my time in the classroom, it was pretty apparent to me that what I felt was the easiest way to differentiate was through using workstations or choice boards, things that gave student choice and that I could kind of help control and then work with students individually or in small groups during the time my students were working. So that's really what drew me to want to talk to you guys today. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you take something away from this. So to get us started, again, I'm Beth McDaniel. I am the secondary RLA specialist here at the Region Center. Here's all my contact info. Feel free to call or email if you have any questions after the presentation. And additionally, any of the handouts that you're going to see today throughout the presentation, you're going to have access to if you will visit this website. I'll give you a second if you would like to go ahead and access that and bookmark it. Again, it also has the link to this Pear Deck. So if you're just now joining, you can go to this bit.ly right here and click on the three little pairs, and it's going to allow you to join the Pear Deck session so that you can give some feedback as we go as well. All right. Hopefully you had a chance to go ahead and, like I say, bookmark that page for future use or reference. And it will be available to you for quite a while. Eventually it may become unpublished, but at least for the next month or so, you'll have access to those documents. They are all created within Google Slides. So at any time you can click on the two documents at the bottom of that website. If you scroll down, you'll see both of them. You can click on them and just click make a copy, and then you have your own copy that you can use within your classroom. They are set as backgrounds so that you can go in and simply add text boxes and change the information and add information to it. All right, so as we go today, we are going to start with just a quick little warm up. We're going to talk about why to use workstations, how to use them, ideas for what your workstations might look like at the secondary level. You're going to have some time to actually create one, and then we're going to do a quick reflection before we part ways. So to get us started, this is for you to respond on how have you used workstations previously, and what are you hoping to learn today about using workstations in the secondary classroom? Although this is a pre-planned presentation, if you do have something specific you're hoping to learn, I want to add that in as we go and make sure I touch on that. So feel free to let me know what you're hoping to learn as well. And again, there is a delay, so I'm going to use some wait time here and let you have some time to type in your answers. All right, thank you guys for participating. We are getting some responses in, and that's awesome. So some of you have used them before, some of you have not, a little bit of a mix. You just want to learn to use them effectively, teaching 9th and 11th, perfect. They've been used before to reinforce previously taught skills. Yes, you've used them before in your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math classes and algebra classes. Looking for ways to learn how to improve small group, perfect. All right, so we're going to keep moving forward, but if you have not had a chance to type in your response, please continue to do so. We have one request coming in, so I'm going to hold just a second so I can see what someone's hoping to learn. How to integrate it with more personalized learning opportunities. Okay. I think I'm going to touch on that a little bit. If I don't cover it enough though, feel free to reach back out to me at a later date or later this afternoon, whatever works for you. And I'll try to get with you on that so that we can come up with something specific for you. All right. So this is just a quote that I really liked in terms of what we can do in our classroom. So the possibilities are endless when we continue to build ideas and structures that support high quality teaching and learning. Learning centers are a tool that we can all leverage. So a little bit of background about me. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for over 30 years. And my big joke on all my interviews or when people ask me about my teaching background is that I actually taught kindergarten for 18 years growing up, because if you have an elementary friend or a family member, you know that elementary teachers spend so much of their time in their classrooms. So pretty much every one of my childhood Saturdays during the school year was spent helping my mom get ready for the next work week. And so, when it came time for me to be a teacher and I wanted to go secondary, I knew there was a lot that I could pull from my experience, so to speak, teaching elementary students. And part of that was using workstations and centers in the secondary classroom. Obviously, it would have to look different, but I love the idea that kids got to explore and discover and choose what they wanted to do. And that through that, they were able to show mastery of learning and they were able to extend their range of knowledge. And so that's really what pushed me to start experimenting with how to do these stations within my own classroom. So let's first talk about our why. Why is it important that we use workstations? So these are just a few of the reasons why I think it's essential and why research shows that we should be using some workstations or centers in our classrooms. And just to clarify really quickly, workstations and centers are sometimes used interchangeably. Workstations are really more of, they're set at the student's desk, they're working in a group collaboratively, and it's very controlled and paced. So they may visit each station for say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and they are supposed to make their way around the whole rotation. Centers are a little bit different. Centers are set throughout your whole classroom. There may be 10 or 15 different centers, and they're not expected to go to every single one of them. They just have to go to X amount during that class period, but there's activities everywhere for them to go and explore. Both are great for secondary students. They both serve a different purpose. And if you want to know more about the centers part of it, again, feel free to reach out and we can have that discussion as well. Today, we're really focused more on the streamlined approach to workstations. So the first one is obviously differentiation, because we can create activities that can meet students where they are and elevate their learning. So within each of our centers, we can differentiate for different learners, whether that be by having leveled reading, whether it is that we are offering, workstations that hit on different key components of learning or types of learning. We can differentiate through our stations quickly and easily without having to really do too much extra work. We can also differentiate through those by having students grouped accordingly, so that there's someone there that either is on their level so that they're not being pushed and get fed the answers by someone else, or where there's people there where they can kind of collaborate and all have a different opinion. So we'll talk a little bit about grouping later on, but keep that in the back of your mind, especially when you start thinking about how you might want to incorporate workstations in your classroom and what you want that to look like. Additionally, they allow for student creativity. This is beyond just a sit and get type of lecture. This is where you're really putting your learning into your students' hands, and that they're having the opportunity to not only show growth and mastery, but they can do that through creative processes. And a lot of that is how you set your stations up. And we just want to make sure that you're really giving them the opportunity to kind of think outside the box. And just remember, a lot of this has to do with how you explain your processes to your students. And we're going to talk more about how to set those explicit instructions here in just a second. This can also work as a formative assessment. If this is something that you're doing for a quick check for understanding, or it could even be something that you're having them turn into to you for you to look at and grade at a later time. We can use this if we are, just reviewing a skill with our students. It could even be something that we may want to work in a station that's always considered review, and it's that lowest TEK on our most recent assessment, or it may just be a TEK we know our students are struggling with. This could also be an individualized station, to where maybe I have your name, and when you get there, you go grab your paper out of your folder and you see what activity you need to be working on. And that can look differently for every student as well. It's going to allow you to maximize learning time. So once your expectations are set, students will know what to do when they enter on workstation days, and your learning can begin immediately. So it is a little bit of a process to get workstations set up in your classroom and to really explicitly explain your expectations. However, once that's done, it's going to allow you that maximum learning time within your classroom. It's going to increase your student engagement. Your kids are going to be excited to get to come in and sit down and figure out what they're going to be doing at each station for the day. They get to have that opportunity for collaboration as they work together and in groups. Collaboration and discussion, and really just having that hands-on opportunity to take control of their own learning is going to increase their retention of the information as well. It allows for experimentation on your part. If you're not sure how an activity is going to go with your students, you can always try it as a workstation. I used to always tell my kids, hey, if there's a new workstation today, you know how to behave in that workstation. It may be changed a little bit, but we're just trying it out. So I want your feedback at the end of the day. Yes, I really like that. Let's do that again. Or I really don't think it worked that well, or this is what could have been done differently. But it allows you to be human for your students also. They get to see that, you're kind of having that productive struggle along with them to figure out different unique ways to keep them engaged during workstations. And finally, it allows you time for those teacher conferences. I know in our shortened secondary class periods, when we may only be seeing students for 40 or 50 minutes a day, it can be really hard to have that one-on-one or small group time for you to do those teacher conferences. But if all your students know what the expectation is of workstations, then you're going to be able to have that time with your other students that you can either do individual conferencing or small group conferencing with them. All right, so here's another interactive slide for you guys. Consider different viewpoints. Draw or type your thoughts on this topic in and around the left head, and draw or type the point of view of the students in and around the right head. So what are you thinking? What's your viewpoint on stations? Maybe you're thinking like it seems overwhelming, or it seems good in theory, but I'm not really sure how it's going to work. And then how do you think your students would feel? Do you think they would be excited because it was something different? Do you think that they would be annoyed because it looks like a lot of work? So go ahead and just add to that slide. And then we will have a little discussion about that and move on. All right, someone just drew hearts in both. So you love the idea, your students love the idea. I have another one with a smiley face for you. We'll see what you put for your students. Your students you think will be kind of like, maybe, okay. Another one says your viewpoint is it's noisy. We'll talk about that in a second. Some of you are really getting creative with your drawings. Love that. All right, on the one that the teacher says noisy, the student says fun and talking. Okay, another teacher viewpoint is differentiation at its best. All right, so getting some good feedback. Students are gonna love it. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys for being interactive. It definitely makes it more fun for everybody when you guys get to hear what others are thinking as well. It'd be really boring if it was just me sitting here talking for the full amount of time and you guys not having a chance to do any interactive activities with it. All right, so let's talk about the how. Someone did mention that it was noisy. We're going to talk about that. There is kind of some ways that we can combat that. And it's also something that, yes, you're going to kind of have to embrace a little bit as well. So implementing workstations. The first one is we want to make sure that we set clear expectations for our students. So what I always suggest to teachers is this: if you are going to want to start including workstations, since we are at the beginning of the school year, start from day one. What is a workstation going to look like in your room? Don't introduce them to all 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, however many you're going to have. Pick one and introduce one each day and tell your kids, okay, this is one of our workstations. This is our art workstation. When you're at the art workstation, there's going to be art supplies for you to use. My expectation is when you get here, all of the art supplies are neat, laid out nicely for you. The activity is going to always be either in this folder or maybe it's going to be on a clipboard, whatever it is. You're going to read what you're supposed to be doing. You're going to have your amount of time to do that. And then you need to make sure that this station looks the exact same when you leave. So clean it up, put everything together, go through those steps with them so they know exactly what you want. So let your students know what their volume should be. At certain workstations, maybe they should be totally silent. At other workstations, maybe they're whispering to their neighbors. At other workstations, maybe there's 4 of them and they're supposed to be talking and collaborating all at once. So let them know. And also put that on your workstation handout or chart or however you're going to organize yours so that they know, okay, when I'm at this workstation, it's art. I'm allowed to whisper to my neighbor and I need to make sure I clean up. Show them what that behavior should look like. How should they move around your room? When they're between stations, how do you want them to move? Have a pattern. They're always going to move counterclockwise. They're always going to pick up their stuff and move all at once. They're always going to high five their neighbor, or they're never going to high five their neighbor. whatever you want it to be, set those expectations and practice, have them practice that. Again, we want to make sure that these are clear and explicit for them so that there's no way that they can do this incorrectly. And if they do, don't be afraid to make them try again. If you notice the art station's messy, have that group go back. Hey guys, we got to take a quick second. We got to make sure this is getting cleaned up. So this group needs to go back, get it clean for your next group. You guys are being really loud during transitions. And you know that when we're transitioning, we're not talking at all. We're keeping our hands to ourselves and we're just quickly moving to the next station. So don't be afraid to have them repeat that. Make sure that they know where their personal belongings are going to go that day. More than likely, you don't want them at their desk because other kids are going to be sitting there. So have them put all their personal belongings at the front of your classroom, or have them put them all, under all the desk, whatever you think is best, hanging on the back of their chair, whatever it is, make sure that they know. And also on workstation days, make sure you're still following that lesson framework. If you always do a warm-up, always do a warm-up or bell work. If you always have an exit ticket, you're still going to want to have an exit ticket. Just because it's workstation days does not mean that we separate from the framework we always follow. The next one is student grouping. Again, you want to consider how your students will be grouped. Do you want them to just be partners? And if so, then how many stations are you going to need for that to work for your biggest class? Do you want them in a group of 4? Do you want them in mixed abilities? Do you want them in ability grouping? Do you want them grouped by behavior? How do you want your students to be grouped? So think about that and have that plan beforehand. I always liked on workstation days to have that up on my screen or on my board when my kids walked in, so that they went immediately to their first station. Even though they were going to do their warm up, they would go sit in their first station to start the day. So that just made it really clear, like, this is my group, this is who I'm working with today. I know to get started on my warm up, and then we'll go from there. The next part is you want to start by actively monitoring. So before you create a teacher-centered station where you might be conferencing or doing that small group work, make sure that you've spent the first few station days to actively monitor, listening into those conversations, walking around and checking in on your kids, making sure that their behavior is where it needs to be. And I would do this randomly throughout the school year as well. Just take one of your days where you're not going to have a small group so that you can get out there and make sure your kids are maintaining those expectations. Have clear signals for time and movement. I've seen this done in a variety of ways. Some people like to get the little doorbells from Amazon and they'll just ring the doorbell, and that's when their kids know to move. I use an old school. I said my mom taught for 30 years, so I have one of the old school bells, and I would just ring that and my kids would know that it was time to move. I've also just set a Google timer and had it go off every however often my students were rotating. So have a clear signal for them. And again, make sure that they know what your expectation of it is of them when they are moving. Additionally, I like to have, even if I'm just ringing my bell to signal for them to move, I like to have a timer going on the board so my kids know how much longer they have to complete that station. You want to have a plan for student questions. If you are going to be leading a small group or having those conferences, you don't want to be interrupted the whole time. So have a plan if your students have questions. Should they go and ask another group? Are you going to have a folder in the front of your classroom that has kind of a frequently asked questions in it? Are you going to have a cheat sheet in the front of your room where your kids can go to it? Do they need to write their note or their question on a sticky note and put it somewhere in your classroom so you can get to it between groups? So kind of have a plan and make sure that your students know what to do if they have a question. And then lastly, we want to create a roadmap, which we're going to talk more about here in just a second. And I'm going to show you an example, and that's one of the papers that is linked on the website. But creating a roadmap just makes it so much easier for you and your students to know exactly what's going on workstation day. And it's so much, to me, it's so much simpler to manage a workstation day if you have a roadmap created for your students. So a big part of implementing workstations is going to be making sure your kids know what the expectation is of them in terms of final product. So I always like to attach a grading rubric to all of my activities so my kids know what they need to do to maximize those points. So this is just a blank grading rubric that you're free to use. You can do this in any way. So what you might want to do is put, in the first box, you may want to have station 1. And then how are they going to get 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 points? Same thing for station 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many you want to do. And you can adjust your numbers to be whatever you want them to be. But that way your kids know exactly what the expectation is. There's no surprises. There's no, well, I didn't know that. Yes, you did. I had a grading rubric. You know exactly what you needed to be doing. It also cuts down on the number of student questions you may have to answer throughout. All right, this is a little bit blurry, and I apologize for that. But this is what we're talking about when we say a roadmap. And I have a blank one, and I'm going to show it to you in just a second. But really, this is just telling your kids, like, these are the stations you're going to today. You can even have your kids mark on theirs which one they're starting at. It gives you a place for a learning target. You can make these whatever you want. This particular one has station, learning target, key deliverable, and some sort of stamp the teacher's giving them that shows completion. Again, you can totally change your labels at the top. You'll see the one that I made looks a little bit differently. So I kept the station. I added in an essential question. What materials were there going to be at that station for them? What did they need to do to show mastery of that TEK or that concept that was being presented at that certain station? And then they were going to get a stamp that they had been there and that they had completed it. So you can, again, this is for you. It's set as a Google slide. You can go in and just put a white box over these and type in whatever you want yours to be or delete it completely. But this is kind of what makes sense to me. So make sure your kids have something like this though, because to me, it makes it more relevant. They know what that essential question is then. They know why they're there, what they're supposed to be doing, what materials they have. Under mastery, what are they going to turn into me? That's what I would list under mastery. What are they actually producing that's going to show that they've mastered this topic? And if your station is an independent reading station, then their mastery of that may just be to answer a question about plot development or character development, or their mastery may be that they read X amount of pages. If you're going to do pages though, keep in mind that not all of your students read at the same rate and that the level of book they're reading is not the same. So it's really hard to say you need to have read this many pages in this amount of time, unless you want to do it as a challenge for your students and set individual goals for that, which is a great thing to do. All right, so the next slide is for you. What would you want to include on your workstation roadmap? So what is something you've seen, and I can click back to it if you need me to, but what is something that you would want to see on that workstation roadmap? And I'm actually going to leave this up and click to it in this other slideshow so it doesn't go off of that for you guys. So here's the station roadmap that I created, if you want to look at that while you type in your answer. Champs, perfect. Yeah, so you may want to put on your workstation roadmap what your expectation is of volume and things like that. Someone said you want to include your TEKs of focus. The only thing I would say if you're going to include your TEKs is make sure that you put them in student-friendly terms and it's not just the numbers, because your kids won't know what that means. And the station roadmap's really for them. Okay, mastery, so students know the success criteria for the learning objective. Absolutely. And I'll say this, if that's a common terminology for your campus is success criteria and learning objective, then you may want to change essential question to learning objective, and you may want to change mastery to success criteria. So think of what your campus already has in place or what you're already required to put on your lesson plans that might be useful for your students in this situation. Ooh, I like that one. Student reflection or their confidence level. Perfect. Your topic or focus for each station and the product expected. Okay, perfect. And you may want to put that on your station roadmap. I personally always made a sheet that listed that out for my kids. So it was on the actual table that said what they were supposed to be producing. Okay, so lots of good stuff coming in. You guys are still typing, so I'll wait just a second. Yeah, we have a comment in here about choice boards. If a choice board is being used and the student can identify what the product will be, absolutely. And the thing with that is if you're going to use a choice board in addition to doing workstations, just be mindful of how much time you're giving them to complete each task that you're asking of them. Okay, someone's saying a learning objective. Perfect. Again, thank you guys so much for the feedback. I appreciate that. All right, pop back over here. All right, so we are going to talk next up about just some ideas for workstations. And a lot of times when I introduce the idea of workstations to teachers, it feels overwhelming at first for a lot of different reasons. Number one, it's something totally new to most teachers. If you are a teacher who really appreciates kind of a quiet classroom, it can be intimidating in that way. If you are someone who likes everything to be very structured, it can feel very unstructured your first few times to do workstations. So I used to always just ask people to please try it multiple times. Don't just try it once and give up on it. And again, it's something that you may want to revisit and re-explain what your expectations are so that your students have the opportunity to meet those expectations. Try not to get frustrated with your students if you think about something and you're like, man, they didn't do that. Well, did you explicitly ask them to do that task in that way? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that was on the student end. But if the answer is no, which it more than likely will be, because we always think that we explained it really well. And they're like, well, I didn't say that explicitly, so I guess not. Try it again, because, we can't expect something of our students if we don't tell them exactly what we're wanting of them. The other thing I will say is make sure, if at all possible, have some sort of an exemplar for what you're wanting their work to look like at the end of that station. And keep it realistic, because if we're giving them an art station and we're only giving them 15 minutes to complete that art or creativity station, we're not going to have necessarily masterpieces walking out of there. I can tell you, if you gave me 15 minutes at an art station, you're getting stick figures with some like word bubbles and maybe like some curly hair coming off of it. And that's probably about it. So just keep your expectations for what their products are going to look like in check in relationship to time. So if you want a higher quality product, give your students more time to complete the activity. Additionally, we want to make sure that we are creating workstations that we can sustain throughout the school year. That being said, we want to keep them broad in terms of the topic or the activity of the workstation, so that all we're really doing is changing out material to be associated to whatever TEKS we're covering at that time. So we're going to talk and dive into that just a little bit here. And I'm going to give you 3 kind of big ideas and then how you might just change them out throughout the school year. And hopefully that'll make sense as we go. And if not, again, I know we're all on the Pear Deck together, but if you have questions that are popping up, feel free to use that Q&A. I told Amy just to interrupt me if anyone had a question. So feel free to use that Q&A and she will just chime in and interrupt so we can get that, not interrupt in a rude way, by the way, Amy. But so that we can get that question answered for you right away. So what could workstations look like in your room? So here's 3 ideas. You might want to have an art station. Your art station could be anything. You might want to have your students drawing a cartoon strip. And depending on your subject, they could draw it for anything. It could be draw a cartoon strip where you show character development. If you're an RLA teacher, if you're a math or a science teacher, it may be that you explain the steps of X, Y, or Z. Social studies teachers, to recap this time in history. Okay, so just be creative in what your students can do. And your students are going to be creative on top of that. So if you're not really sure, you could maybe give them 3 or 4 ideas. Like, hey, I want you to show me what you know about this topic. And you can do it in any of these ways. You might want to have them create a poster or a brochure, a collage, some sort of a photography project. And keep in mind too, art can look different for all of your students. So you may want to have paper and pencils and markers and paintbrushes and all of those things. And you may also want to have a couple of computers where kids can sign into Canva or go to a cartoon maker and they can do that all from right there. You may want to have magazines where they can clip pictures from. And if you're not sure where to buy those, I know for me, my library had a subscription to a ton of different magazines. And I just would go to my librarian all the time and be like, hey, do you have any leftover magazines that are old that you're about to throw away? And she would always bring them to me so that my kids could use them in my classroom. The next one is writing. So as you guys may or may not know, for all of us secondary folks, well, really for everybody, but we're the ones that are more heavily tested. Our tests are changing. Our state testing is changing. And for all subjects, there will be a writing component. So all of our students will be doing some sort of writing on their STAR test from now on. It won't be an essay necessarily unless you are RLA, but there will be short answers and things like that. All of that will be field tested this year. So it's more important than ever that we're incorporating writing into every single content that we possibly can. So in your writing station, it could be anything. Have them write a summary of their learning. Have them write questions. I used to always love for my students to challenge my students to write higher level questions. You may want to start your school year by giving them question stems that they can complete and then kind of wean them off as they go, depending on your grade level. Have them write a reflection of learning. Maybe you want to have them write a list of all of the things that they're still not sure about. Have them go in and rewrite their notes or take their notes and make them sketch notes. You may want to give them something to read and then they're going to go in and write the notes over it. Have them make connections. Where could you use this in real life? Where could you use this in another subject? How would you explain this to a friend? Write a letter to someone explaining this idea or this topic. And then have a technology station. So if you are a one-to-one school, that's awesome. This will not be a challenge for you. If your school happens to not be one-to-one yet, this is where you're going to want to go and make sure you've got at least 4 or 5 different laptops, Chromebooks, whatever, for your students to be able to use that day. Excuse me. We want to, some ideas for technology would be anything within Google Suite. So slides are fantastic. Your kids can do a lot of different activities within Google Slides. Google Docs doesn't allow as much creativity, but if you're wanting them to kind of collaborate and it's going to be more writing based, then Google Docs is great for that. My math people, science people, even history people, timelines or classification of things. Google Sheets is great for that. Don't forget about the little ones too, like Jamboard. There's Blogger. Google Suites has all sorts of stuff. I like to have my kids even create Google Sites, like the one that I shared with you today. They're quick and they're easy and they can put a ton of information on there. This might be a good time to have an audiobook or something for your students to listen to and then respond to. Pear Deck, like we're doing today, you can set this to where your students can go through it self-paced. So you could put in any information you want. You can have these same question type slides associated with it, where your kids can then self-pace through it and answer questions. If your district pays in for Discovery Education, there's a ton of fantastic resources on Discovery Education for more than just science. I know as an RLA teacher, I was always like, oh, that's for the science people. That's for the science people. No, there's literally something for everyone within Discovery Education. They've also made an interactive platform on Discovery Education where your kids can go in and create and pull resources right there. So if that's something that your district has, I would highly, highly recommend looking into it and seeing how you can use it in your classroom. And then of course, you can always use technology for those common things like research or a web quest, things like that. So whatever you do, I would always recommend having at least half of your stations be consistent throughout your school year. Again, the activity within it might change depending on your unit that you're currently covering, but the station itself will stay the same. I know every time we do stations in Ms. McDaniel's room, I'm going to have an art station, I'm going to have a writing station, I'm going to have a technology station. I hope that makes sense. All right. So take a minute and brainstorm. You can do this to where you're using one that I just talked about, or you can come up with something different. There's also could be a reading station. There could be a game station. There could be a collaboration station. Man, that's kind of a tongue twister. So write your general station title in the middle and then brainstorm a couple of activities that you might want to put within that station. If you're not sure, again, feel free to use mine, and I'm going to use some wait time here for you guys to have time to respond. All right, so we've got some good overall ideas coming through so far. Everyone's kind of getting that middle circle filled in. I'm going to wait until there's some activities to share with you also. All right, so this one is really good. Love this one. It's a hands-on station. And then some of the activities that might be included would be a card sort activity, modeling with manipulatives, or a left side interactive notebook reflection. We've got another one that's graphic analysis, observation, inference, justification, a four-corner brain dump, write a summary explaining what you see. There's some great ideas. Give it just a few more minutes. Some of you are still working on it. All right. So another one for characters. It says beginning. I'm assuming like what's going on in the beginning. What does that character kind of look like in the beginning of the story? And then a reflection of what they look like at the end of the story. Maybe drawing the character using that imagery that the author produced. Perfect. All right. So some really good ideas on how you can kind of make this your own. I love that. All right, so this is kind of the last part, and this is really for you to kind of think about what this is actually going to look like in real life in your classroom. So we're going to do this part here, and then I'm going to show you a few examples of what it can look like in a classroom in terms of what could some of your other set stations be and what are some of the ideas behind that. So if you guys will just hang on until the end, I'm going to share those with you also. And what I share with you at the end, if that's something that you would like to see and have a copy of, then you are more than welcome to reach out either via email or if you'll put it in the Q&A at the end, your email address. Amy, you'll get those for me and I will send you. That little thing is kind of an extra thank you for attending live in person today, where you can get a copy of that. All right. So with it being your turn, a big part of workstations is this. We don't want to just have 6 different activities out there that mean nothing for our students. So what TEKs are we trying to cover? Each station should either cover one TEKs, because they are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills So I guess pluralize would be TEKS. But what TEKS are we covering? Determine how students are going to demonstrate knowledge. Consider how you want your stations to operate, and then begin planning your stations collaboratively. So this is something that you may want to get with a thought partner on back in your own district, or if you have a friend who's a teacher that you can talk with them, or even, like I say, feel free to give me a call and I can help think this through with you. But how do you want to use workstations in your classroom moving forward? And like I said, I would highly recommend starting your first week by introducing your students to a station. Not all of them at once. I wouldn't take a day to just talk about stations, but slowly introduce them to what that's going to look like in your classroom. So take a second. Maybe you already know of one off the top of your head that you're like, this would lend itself so well to showing mastery through a workstation. So what is your skills focus? And you don't have to give the TEK. You can say, like, if you're a math teacher, my math friends always laugh at me because I just throw out Pythagorean theorem. It's like my one math term I always have in my back pocket. But whatever your skill is, and then what activities do you think that you could use with your kids? So again, I'll give you just a minute to do that. And while y'all do that, I'm going to collect real quick in my office the little extras that I want to show you guys. All right, got a few people putting in some answers for me. Thank you. I do have a math person that did not choose Pythagorean theorem. So thank you for that. You're exposing me to new math terminology today. So we've got solving equations with variables on both sides. So activity 1 would be algebra tiles, equation solution. Activity 2, find the mistake. Perfect. Got a few more of you adding in some answers. And then we're going to close this out. So reading comprehension and mood. Perfect. Using art and having students choose, slowly coming in, photos from magazines too. All right, so having students choose photos from a magazine that represent that mood. Okay, and then a good comment came through that I want to share with everybody. So it says, if I'm doing stations, I typically choose activities that I taught in small group the week prior so that it's spiraled for mastery. Yes, perfect. And keep in mind too that you can use stations in your room to introduce ideas, to go back and for your students to show mastery. So it can be used at different times. You just have to figure out what you feel comfortable with. I know for RLA, I used it both ways. There were times where I would use it to introduce activities or a new unit to my students, just to kind of give them some general knowledge, have them become engaged with the material before we really started. And there were other times where I would use it to kind of close out a unit or to close out certain TEKs so that my kids had a good overall review and were able to demonstrate mastery. So consider how it would work best in your classroom. And you may want to, if you don't know, you may want to try it both ways and see what works best for you and for your students. All right. So to close out, we do have a quick reflection. So in 1 minute, write the most important thing from today's lesson or one takeaway that you have for today. Maybe it's something you learned, or maybe it was something you were reminded of, or maybe it's a question you have that you wish you had more information on. And then I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to share my face again and show you these station activities. All right, so some good stuff coming in. A few things are just in terms of making sure to give explicit instruction, to set those expectations, to wait to have a teacher-led station until your students kind of have the vibe of what to do. Love the roadmap. Okay, good. That helps with expectations in the beginning. Introducing one station a day before putting them all together. Yeah, I really feel like that helps kids know exactly what your expectation is, and it helps you have more control over that kind of gradual release of what the stations are going to look like. Perfect. All right, and I hope that you took away that, you know, your workstations, again, a lot of teachers feel like they're a lot of work, and they can be, but the biggest piece of it is this, is that by providing your students with opportunities to display knowledge in a variety of ways, you're really differentiating for all of your students, not just your struggling students. And so overall, you've got differentiation happening for every kid in your classroom. And I used to always tell my kids too, there was always kind of a free choice. And what that was if you got to a station and you didn't feel like it was something that you could complete that day, or you didn't feel like it was something that really allowed you to display your strengths, then you had the opportunity to propose something different. And if it was a day that I was in a small group, then my kids knew that they just had to fill out that form proposal, and they would quickly just drop it by to me really quick, right as that station was kind of starting. And I would give them a thumbs up from across the room, like, yep, you're good to go with your proposal. Love that. Or I'd be like, nope. And my kids learned really quickly what was and wasn't going to get approved. It was not going to get approved that you could take a nap at that station, but it was going to get approved that you could write a rap song instead of drawing a cartoon strip. And so your kids will learn pretty quickly what they can and cannot do within your workstations and within your flexibility for those workstations. All right, so real quick before I leave the screen share, here is my contact information. If you want to take a quick photo of that with your phone or jot down my email address or my phone number. I will say email is a lot easier in terms of getting back to you, because even if I'm out working in a district on my lunch break, I usually check emails and I can email you back really quickly. And if you want what I'm about to share with you, you can reach out to me via email and just say, hey, could you send those to me? I really like them and I want to be able to use them in my classroom. And I will happily forward you what I'm about to show you. It is set as a PDF. I think I have it saved as a PDF and a JPEG. So I can send it to you like that. And you can use it either if you wanted to take this back and present it in your own district, or if this was something that you could figure out how to manipulate to use in your classroom. So, all right, let me stop my screen share. And let me turn my camera back on. Okay, so like promised, I stopped screen share and I'm going to show you really quickly. I just have these printed off. I guess I could show you the PDF on my screen, but this just seems easier. But what I did was I went in and well, maybe this isn't easier because of my virtual background. This is what I did. It's nothing, just kidding. 1 second, give me just a second. And I'm gonna find it as a PDF so that I can just share it or show it to you guys that way. I didn't think about the whole green screen not working. So bear with me for just a second. Sorry about that.
While Beth's pulling that up, someone pointed out that there was a mistake on Beth's email address. So
Oh,
it's bmcdaniel at
Thank you.
esc6.net, by the way.
I should have proofread my own presentation. Let me, is that? All right. I'm going to bring this up in Canva actually, because that's where I created it. If you don't use Canva, I would highly recommend using Canva. It's a great product to create stuff for your classroom. So let me share my screen again. All right. So hopefully now, Amy, chime in if you're not seeing it, but you should be seeing my Canva screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So this is something that I actually created for another presentation where I'm going to have people live and we're going to have a little bit more time. So they're actually going to go around and create these stations. But like I said, these are station ideas that would be set in stone for your whole year. So station 1, art. This is what you might want to create to go with it or have your students be creating. And then what do you want to make sure you have? Those explicit instructions, material list, rubric, and an exemplar. Station 2 would be writing. You may want to have a vocabulary station, a reading station, technology station. And then you may want to have, even for your students, a free station. This is a free station for our participants to kind of create whatever they want to, but this, your free station for your kids may be choose from these 5 activities and you can do whichever one you want. So these are just some ideas that you may want to take back and use and have as your own like set in stone stations. And again, there are 6 of them. So if you're like, yes, I need to be on a 6 station rotation model as well. Those sound good. Will you send me those topic ideas or will you send me those pages? Yes, I will. If you'll email me at the correct email address, which sorry, it is not correct on the slideshow, but you can also find me if you just look on the website for ESC6. So let me stop share. Okay. Last thing before we go, if there's no questions in the Q&A, is if this is something you're interested in and you want more information and you really want time to create and have some assistance creating it, we are actually offering a secondary workstations full day in-person training here at the Region Center. Of course, I don't know that date off the top of my head. I can look it up. Sorry, I'm looking on my other screen, so it looks a little weird on the video, but that's okay because I want to give you the date. And we will be here. You'll have specialists in at least 2 content areas, if not all content areas, so that there will be someone here for you to have a thought partner and to really think through what those secondary workstations might look like in your classroom, how you can start implementing them, and what you can make of them. And we will hopefully have you leaving here with a plan, with a roadmap for your first workstation workday, for rubrics created, all of that. So that's kind of our goal. And that is going to be here at the Region Center on Thursday, September the 9th. So if that's something that you're interested in attending, this was just a small piece of what you're going to see there. It will be on a much grander scale with a lot of work time built in for you to take what we're presenting and make it ready for you to take back and implement in your classroom the next day if that's something that you're interested in doing. So if you have any questions, again, reach out to me. The correct email address is bmcdaniel@esc6.net. And I will be happy to be a thought partner for you or to answer any questions you may have or to send you any resources that you saw today. If you have an issue with any of the stuff on the website, I'm happy to send that to you in a different way as well. So thank you so much. If there's no questions, we'll give it just a second since we are on a bit of a delay. But if not, then thanks for attending.
Beth, thank you so much. You did an awesome job sharing with us some great ideas for workstations. I know I even learned a few things. So before we close, I just want to share a few things. There is a session feedback link with a survey at the bottom. I know Beth and I would really appreciate it if you would take just a few minutes to fill that out so we can grow our own practice. Also, a recording of this session will be added to the presentation platform when it's available, and you'll be able to access and download the handouts that she has shared with you. And I don't see any other questions in the platform. I did get a couple of emails that I'm going to share with Beth, so thank you for sharing that. And that's it. So thanks again for joining us.